It's July 28th, 2023. We went today with through the Bruce Alliance, or the Bruce membership, I think is what it's called. I discovered something called um, Newburger Museum. So we went to go visit that and purchase New York. Um, and there they had Dennis Oppenheim, not Oppenheimer, but Dennis Oppenheim, and it was an art exhibit, mechanical trance. Um, I took a photo. It suggested that photoing the words used. I'm having trouble with short-term memory at the moment. I was also in this exhibit, and my nose just started like gushing blood. No idea why. I don't get nosebleeds. And my son says to me, he says, "Mom, you're like that girl from Stranger Things." He's like, "Why is your nose bleeding?" And I'm like, "You mean 11?" And he's like, "Yeah." And my father got the same thing, same side of the nose, and it just started gushing. It was something, one of those Stranger things. So anyway, so that's where we were today. And then I come home and I'm watching the Channel 7 News, and like obviously I mean, this is my light source, but there's this heat advisory going on. They actually have newscopter photos, and it shows the dimensional science like in a wave pattern. I don't have the studies in laboratory or at academia level to know the words that the scientists use. um, I only know off of the news station how they classify it or what words they use to describe it. So I'm going to use this, and then I'm going to go to the Ancient Skies version of what they were speaking about when they talked about the radiological imprint, um, just for a pairing, because it's what I believe. I can't confirm it, but it's what I believe. And then I'm going to go, while I'm concerned about that, and there's some real serious things that I don't have words or tools to measure other than what I'm doing. Um, I'm going to go back to some other things that are going on that are of concern. Um, so this is what this is the station. I don't know, at college, usually when you write a paper or something, they like some form of a reference, so you know there's a source, and then the source can be checked or verified. But now this is the image, and you can see the line. Like, I don't know the science behind it. I just know that, like, in a conversation, not in an alarmist way, but just documenting way, I don't know what the science is where the ground heat signature actually starts to disrupt the visual in the science of whatever the ether, I guess, around us. I don't even know if that's the appropriate term, but I can see it clearly here.
Told him that he was going to get the passengers off of the airplane and ask them to please roll the fire trucks. So that's what you're seeing right now. You have to excuse those waves that you see in your picture. That's just how hot it is outside, and that's the heat coming off the asphalt at Kennedy Airport. We're also pretty far away from this, but in the center of that.
So this is New York. This is Kennedy Airport, and that's what he's saying. He claims it's the heat coming off the asphalt. I guess that's the appropriate words to say. Um, so I'm gonna go from this image.
You see a small propeller plane, I believe.
Yeah, I'm not worried about the plane. I'm more worried about the breaking in the science between the tarmac and like where humans walk through, especially with my lights, like signature in New York being as high as it is resolution wise. So I'm going to pause this for a second and go to the ancient skies because they have some scientific thing that they say that they use at like an astronomer's level, which I don't even have access to that level of knowledge or science. So I'm going to pause this for a second. So it's called Our Place in the Universe, and it's season 1, episode 3.
From what we think was the start of the universe.
This cosmic microwave background has helped us to calculate how old the universe might.
So that's the microwave. And again, like even that short term, it's not what I call sinking in, where then it's readily repeatable. I'm having trouble with that function. Today, again, I said before, nosebleed, not something, and last night I got a nosebleed, not something that normally happens to me, but it's just now something else I'm adding to my medical record as I'm going through and some of these things that I've experienced. Now, this particular episode of Cuomo, he's speaking directly to Graves about the UFO thing. And he said something that was really key. He said, it's not the Senate hearing, it was a congressional hearing. I don't really know what the difference is. In the series of rooms I've been within in the United States of America or within this territory of New York, it's not really clear what each one or how they're set up, which just adds to my confusion even more.
The real aftermath, which is really just the first step of this battle for transparency. News Nation's exclusive interview with a UFO government whistleblower has changed the course of congressional recognition of the need to know more about what is in the air around us. Yesterday, Americans heard for the first time the personal accounts of fighter pilots who encountered UFOs lots of times. They were testifying in this landmark congressional UFO hearing, and they say the government has this information and has more than anything we've ever seen, and that they're keeping it from us. Why? One key military whistleblower is former Navy pilot Lieutenant Ryan Graves. He described in detail what these UFOs look like and how they fly. Look.
And what I noticed here is on this, first of all, kudos to his mom for naming him Ryan. I mean, he's the upper and lowercase gamma in Greek, especially for the conversation I'm having within my life frame. But I noticed on these images, it says slave. And then it even says later on in the episode, which I'll point out, it says slave and then it says UFC. And I'm like, now in my level, in the series of rooms I've been in, the humans have made this Ultimate Fighting Club, UFC. I've never watched it. Again, it's something you have to pay for and go to places that I don't really hang out. And so, but I know it exists. And then there was some movie called Fight Club. I saw that. And so it all of a sudden brought on something new. I made a note of it on Facebook about this word slave that everybody seems to be really, really angry about. And I'm like, oh, now they're bringing it out in a totally new context. Like, oh, that's like a Navy pilot thing, slave? I was like, oh, and then the ultimate fighting club, right? Well, that's the war machine. That makes sense. And all of a sudden it was like, oh, all right, well, it feels like that's one piece of the puzzle that seems to fit a little bit easier than what, I mean, like this What were you led to believe? You really, I wasn't led to believe anything at this point. I'm just trying to catch up.
We were primarily seeing dark gray or black cubes inside of a clear sphere.
I'm sorry, dark gray or black cubes?
Yes, inside of a clear sphere, where the apex or tips of the cube were touching the inside of that sphere.
All right, so now what? Congress is, quote, in talks, unquote, to create a new committee solely dedicated to investigating UFOs and the national security threat they may pose. The whistleblowers claimed at the hearing it's not just fighter pilots who are seeing UFOs. And Graves said it's also commercial pilots. They fly the planes that you and I are in, right? But they can't report it, or they're worried about reporting it. Really? Let's bring in UFO whistleblower Ryan Graves to kind of dig in to what we need to get done here to be safer, but also be in control of the people that we put in power. It's good to have you. Thank you for your participation.
Thanks for having me here, Chris.
How do you know that the government has lots of proof of things that are flying around that pilots like you in the military and pilots like you on commercial airlines definitely see, are not crazy, and can't figure out what they are?
Well, the reason we know that is because we're asking the pilots now, and the pilots have a method to report that, at least in a limited fashion within the United States Navy, and they've been submitting hundreds of reports. And out of those reports, many of them turn out to be something that's a very explainable or mistaken identity, but a large number of them also remain unidentified, and those are the ones that we're interested in right now.
Now, what is the best case scenario for why the military doesn't want to discuss what it knows?
Well, I think at this point, the best case scenario is that we would find out that this is an adversary, such as China or someone else that is probing our defenses. I think that would be the best case scenario. If we turned out that this was a blue on blue, I think this would demonstrate a level of dysfunction in our government that would be pretty historic.
Although that could be likely also, right? When you think about the stealth bomber, the B-2 bomber, the Manhattan Project, you know, there is a culture of trying to keep quiet what the American military deems an advantage. Could it be that we are developing things, or private corporations are developing things with the government or on their own that they don't want us to know about?
Well, one easy way that we could help open up some transparency on that would be to have some clarity on the classification security guidelines that dictate exactly what parts of a UAP are classified and which are not. Unfortunately, this security classification guideline is itself completely classified, although available via FOIA. So these are the type of things that we need to work on with Congress and with Senate as we move forward legislation in order to be able to release information to the American people.
How common, in your experience and what you're hearing, is it that people see things that do things that they're not used to seeing?
Well, let me give you a particular example. I was seeing objects in 2014 that resembled the cubes and spheres. About a year and a half went by. I left on deployment, and I went somewhere else in Mississippi. I had a number of years later, one of my former students reached out to me to let me know that he was still seeing the cubes and the spheres over in 2019 time period. So we've been seeing these objects for such a long period of time that we need to also step back and look and ask what would be operating our airspace, doing the same behaviors that we still don't understand for almost a decade now.
How come no other countries express these kinds of concerns and curiosity?
Well, I think they do. I think they do to a large degree, more so than they do in the United States. In South America, the conversation is much more open, as well as in France and other places within Europe. I know China has some programs that have been looking at this in the public sphere, as does Japan. And so in some sense, although we might be somewhat very embroiled in this conversation as a public, I think we're somewhat behind the conversation.
Yeah, you know, my producer was just saying in my ear, Brazil. You know, I've looked into it there, and they definitely have a fascination with what's in the air. There's a lot of controversy about drones that they're trying to figure out there in terms of their culture of how they're used and how they're not.
But I think it's almost uniquely American, tying it to extraterrestrial life and this inability to really get any information out of the government about it. It would be really easy for the government to say, listen, forget about what we know. Let me just tell you what we don't know. We have no proof of life on any other planet. They could very easily wave this away. They don't. Why?
Well, maybe they don't know the actual origin of these objects. Maybe they are actually mysterious. I don't have the answer of those, but the only way I think we're going to be able to come to any kind of consensus as a country on this is if we have transparency on it, if we have all our best scientists working on this, and we're distributing this information across our society.
It bothers you at all that the congressional leadership isn't taking hold of this issue?
Well, I would say they are to some degree more than they were a week ago. I was really happy with the show up at the hearing itself and the bipartisan questioning that they were doing. They were not joking around. They had some pointed questions, and it sounded like there's going to be some serious follow up and potential repercussions if they weren't listened to.
Right. We're showing pictures right now of senators, Schumer, McConnell. This wasn't a Senate hearing. It was a House hearing. You didn't see Hakeem Jeffries. You didn't see McCarthy on that side. It does seem like something. Do you think that there's a culture for all the talk about deep state and all this? Do you think that this is not a fight that they want to have?
Well, I'm not sure that's a question that I can answer.
So they're using the words House and they're using the word Senate as I thought it was House or Congress. I have to really think on that. I don't know how they use these words differently.
Right now, there's a small but growing support for this in Congress. I went to the Hill before the hearings on Wednesday, and I traveled the halls and I spoke with various members there, and I made my case to them behind the scenes in their office to just express more or less what I'm expressing to you, that this is a serious national security concern. It's an aviation safety concern, regardless of the conclusions about where they are or what we've been working for. So we need to ensure that we provide pilots with the proper tools that they can report this on.
Well, I'll tell you where else you have support. Right here at News Nation, because I agree with your concerns. I don't believe that all of these pilots can be wrong. And it doesn't have to be about little green men. Look, I'm open. I choose to believe in a higher power. I don't have the arrogance to believe that there's no chance that this is the only planet that figured out life. But that's not my pursuit here. My pursuit is that we have to know what might take you out and hurt you, what might hurt people on a plane going to visit family or going on vacation. And the government should not be in the business of keeping things from the American public because it's convenient. So you will always have a platform here. And I appreciate that you did what you could to agitate for these hearings and that you'll keep going. And we are here to help for the interest of transparency.
I appreciate your support, Chris. Thank you so much.
Did any of those guys leave you with an impression that there's a next?
Oh, I think there's going to be many more hearings. I do, Chris.
All right. Well, let us know. All right. And good luck to you going forward with your organization.
Thank you so much, Chris.
All right. I appreciate you very much. Lieutenant Ryan Graves, thank you for your service and thank you for your participation. 4 minutes, 20 seconds.
Now, there was a piece of that. I began with the break in the heats and light spectrum, then transitioned through to the UFO thing. Now I'm going to go over a different section, but just as important, of things that are, like, again, if I do dot patterns on an artist's rendering, almost like dominoes, and how dominoes have dots, and it's a way of rationalizing without having, just in a black and white format, without having to rationalize anything or put a label on anything. It's areas of concern at like a dominoes level. On CBS, they talk about passports, and there's this backlog And then they show this representative named Patel at the podium. And I'm like, now he's in the State Department at state.gov? Whose state? Like, he's not United States. What states are he? I mean, because again, it says www.state.gov, and his name is Patel, and he's the one actively. He's also, there's a representative that looks very much like him that shows up at Zion when my son goes to the Gilded Room for Sunday schooling. And then yesterday they showed on E149 something called a Khan, Khan, which translates to chief or ruler in some known tribal feud from elsewhere. She's sitting in something called a Federal Trade Commission position. And I'm like, so now, wait. So now there's a Khan at the federal level, even though my federal and my reserve looks like this. It says it on the paperwork. And then it's also part of the United States of America territory. And I'm like, so, and then there's at state level. So one's sitting in a federal chair, and then there's someone else sitting at a state's podium having a voice when I'm stuck in a room and I didn't get here in these lands the same level of education and opportunity that they somehow got to these positions. There's something seriously wrong. This is what it looks like on the footage.
Welcome back to CBS Mornings. As travelers get ready for summer vacations, many are scrambling to get their passports in time. The State Department is still digging out from a processing backlog that started during the pandemic, and now some members of Congress are stepping in to help. Christina Ruffini has more from Washington. Christina, good morning.
Good morning, John. Well, getting a passport can now take up to 13 weeks, and that's partially due to the record number of people trying to go abroad, but it's also twice the processing time as before the pandemic, and a lot of people don't realize it's going to take that long to get their documents until it's too late.
This trip was everything to us.
About a year ago, Connie Rayner and Vicki Heller booked the European cruise of a lifetime with 81 family members and friends.
When did you guys actually get your passports?
3 days after our ship left.
But coordinating logistics for a battalion of buddies was easy compared to renewing their passports.
I just assumed it was quick and easy.
It was not. Both women mailed in their applications.
Now, the way they're presenting it is that this is the home team. They're not out of boundaries. They're what the presidential palace of expectation on Federal Reserve is for this area, and they're the ones having trouble getting their ability to travel, their U.S. passports.
Perilously close to the stated 13-week turnaround time. Realizing the documents might not make it, they requested expedited processing, but 5 days before departure, still no passports. The women even offered to fly to an in-person appointment anywhere in the country, but none were available.
We contacted the Congressman's office, said, what can you do for us?
Right, if my member of Congress can't get this done, then who can, right?
Exactly.
They're not alone. Across the nation, panicked passportless passengers are reaching out to lawmakers.
I don't know who's in charge of passports at the State Department, but I wouldn't trust them to take my lunch order.
This is a basic governmental job.
Oklahoma Republican Senator James Lankford says his office has had to assign 3 full-time staff members to passport duty.
Is this the #1 issue you're hearing from constituents right now?
Yeah, I have a...
If they're having trouble with hiring, first of all, I'm available. But why are there not lists of homegrown and went to school and graduated children that are still unemployed because the Social Security number tracks that? Why are people like myself not being contacted and asked to work in these governmental positions? I would be most honored to work within the system. but yet they're not even utilizing the resources of the presidential palace children for this area, as per the Federal Reserve notes and the United States of America paperwork that is actively used and circulated and has been for several generations.
250 open cases right now in my office. The painful part is they don't know what's happening to it. When you stick it in the mail, you don't know where it is.
Langford is proposing new legislation he says would help tackle the backlog, including better online tracking, allowing the State Department to surge staff from other departments, and expanding the number of in-person appointments.
Do you think that 12 weeks is an acceptable turnaround time?
It is a reflection of the demand.
Now, that person is not part of, like, I that's where my confusion is, how he's a spokesperson for State's Department when he might have a presidential palace elsewhere, but he doesn't necessarily speak on behalf of the presidential palace children over here. That's where, like, I'm getting real confused with this and with what's going on, and with where does the responsibility lay, and why is this, it just, I don't know, it seems like one of these perhaps unrecognized problems that are in the system that could pose a threat that I'm concerned about, being that I'm not even being called and offered positions of employment or...
The State Department says it's already working to improve the process.
This is going to be turning of a dial a little bit, not exactly flipping a switch.
But any potential improvements will come too late for many Americans who've already missed the boat. Or in this case, the cruise liner.
Is your advice to people just, whether you're going on a trip or not, just get your passport?
Do not make payments. Do not book that trip until you have that passport at hand.
Don't even make the reservation until you've got a passport?
I would not.
So that's at State Department. Now let's go to see what they showed me was working in the Federal Trade Commission position at federal level. Now she's working on something with taking on big tech, and she's FTC chair. So now they have somebody with a label, just like that King label, King, that drives me crazy, with the one reporter in New York, and I'm like, that's not an accurate representation, because she's in someone else's presidential palace, and she's using, I get that she's using it as her name, but take a stage name. I mean, just, it's a representation and a signaling of a larger problem.
For the little guy. First, on CBS Mornings, we spoke with Khan about what she says is the end of decades of retreat by government from its role ensuring fair competition. In just 4 years, Lena Khan went from law student at Yale to leading 1,100 employees at the influential Federal Trade Commission.
And they even say how influential this place is. Again, for me, that's an area of concern. I'm going to pause this for a second. So for me, those are areas of concern. They also have on something with retail, like just in the local area. There's some big thing going on at lower crime level amongst the retail sector, where people are just, and they put a lot of footage on, where they're going in through surveillance, they're showing it. They're going in and they call it a smash and grab, where they just walk in and they just take hordes of stuff and then walk out. And that's been going on, and there's something called a black market for that. Again, not stuff that I'm really familiar with. But there's just seems to be this overall break in the system. Yesterday, they put up something called "The Shark is Broken." That seems like a really classy way to say that something is off. Just not quite sure what. It doesn't, I mean, as far as signaling goes, I'm seeing all this visual scenery. Like, my set is New York, and the United States of America is the territory. They've already set the expectation of what the Federal Reserve and what the presidential palace children look like for that expectation. And then there's areas I'm seeing where, just in my parents' generation, their hiring practices were completely different than where it is today. And even on my ability on the mainstream media outlets like Channel 2, Channel 4, Channel 5, Channel 7, they're weather people, they're sports people, and not all of them, but their hiring practices has completely, it's like they rearranged chairs, and I'm watching as if I'm putting dots on an ivory stick, like a domino, to count how many. It used to be they were all the same, and now just how much has been rearranged. And then if I take that same plotting technique and I use it at like sports, on the sports courts or the sports fields, I'm noticing just how little presidential palace appropriate children are still in their whatever, and how many has been replaced by something else that I don't have labels or identifying whatever. And I'm not sure where this massive interruption in ability to it's just, I don't have all the words for it. So I'm just going to put it with, if it was on a domino and I had the before and the after, the dots and the ratio are completely rearranged. And then I can see very clearly at states positions, at federal positions, that there are chairs being conducted that look more like embassy children or a UN position, but it's inside the interior of the Continental, where our presidential palace is something different. And again, that's big signals for me that I don't know how to raise my hand for that level of help, and who to even address that to, or what the chain of command is for that. I'm so out of touch with that, but I see serious things like the light level, and the heat signatures. My physiology is being disrupted, and it's just large area concern. It's star 1978, star 8378, Nicole, Cattaruzza, it's Earth, solar system, Milky Way, universe, galaxy is broken, and it's Bayside Station, Bayside, New York, 11361.